Today we're going to be getting a Handel on the Doctrine of Affections. I'm a classically trained soprano. I'm also a lover of Baroque music, and I've spent my entire life in English-speaking, culturally Christian nations. This combination has had inevitable consequences. It means that George Frederick Handel's best-known oratorio has been part of my musical life almost from the beginning. The Messiah is so thoroughly integrated into our collective consciousness that it managed to reach even unto that remote corner of the Pacific Northwest where I grew up. Because I've heard this music and sung it repeatedly, Handel's work has shaped my ideas as to what good music should be. His vocal fireworks have ignited my own ambition as a singer. This aria was the foundation of my early repertoire. Because it's not intended for church, it's far more useful in a sense. But for all that this is a source of great delight, it also posed a musical problem. Opera is deeply and intentionally emotive, but Handel is a Baroque composer, and I thought that Baroque music was supposed to be entirely intellectual and detached and mechanical. But Handel wrote opera. Opera can be quite overwrought. These two approaches utterly contradict each other. So I realized that I needed to research the context of Baroque opera. whether I should be approaching Handel's music with mathematical precision or with my passions fully on display. So, first I looked for information on the history of early opera. Then I explored the academic literature regarding the history of the emotions from this period. In doing so, I stumbled across the Doctrine of the Affections. This theory posits that specific compositional elements can be employed to elicit a predictable set of emotional responses in the listener. I realized that if I could find evidence that Handel had utilized these techniques, it would be clear that his music was intentionally emotive. It would also provide guidance for my own interpretation. The Doctrine of the Affections is a logical extension of medieval ideas regarding the music of the spheres. When I understood that, it led me to consider that the intellectual progression of ideas that might have brought the Doctrine of Affections into being. To me, this appeared to be an extension of scientific thought. From my research as a historian, I knew that observation and categorization were hallmarks of early modern thinking. This might suggest that the Doctrine of Affections is a mechanistic system. But I could also see that there was a transition away from the passive acceptance of an unknowable and all-pervasive power and towards an assertion of individual intentionality and self-efficacy, and that this was essential to the Doctrine of the Affections. I knew that early modern intellectual life generally was marked by these tensions. I had never before made such a clear connection between Baroque music on the one hand, that I had studied as a musician on the one hand, and the long 18th century that I had studied as a historian on the other. It made me curious about what those years that the Baroque period actually encompassed meant. So I decided to systematically compare dates. In doing so, I found that this period was filled with people and events who are tremendously important to modern life. These events and ideas will have had an impact on the composers who lived and worked during this time. Therefore, they must be assumed to have been influenced. They must be assumed to have an influence on the music that was created, however obliquely. Then I narrowed my focus. I found that the putative father of modern philosophy, René Descartes, had written extensively on the subject of music. He expressed ideas that closely resembled the Doctrine of Affections. He also articulated a highly mechanistic approach to music. This may be the thing that led to the attitude that a clinical, emotionless approach was appropriate for Baroque repertoire. But Descartes was not the only important philosopher during the 18th century. Rousseau's writings were also pivotal. Rousseau considered what it meant to be human. He thought about humanity might seek the common good. He articulated ideas that led to our modern democratic societies. But Rousseau was not just a philosopher. He was also a musician, a composer, and a writer on the subject of music. This means that he was more than just an armchair critic. He had practical knowledge of what he was talking about. According to Rousseau, emotion was more important than intellectual reasoning. For him, the purpose of music was to communicate emotions. Descartes and Rousseau were in many ways opposite. I can see now that the Baroque music is a harmonious blend of both of these perspectives. Baroque music is deliberately intellectual and refined and highly systematic, but it is also deliberately, intentionally filled with emotion. The Doctrine of Affections was born of this world and helps to illuminate it. This is the world that George Frederick Handel was born into. To add some context, I've also shown a few other important people that you might recognize. Each of them were born within a couple of years in Handel. They were also born within a small geographical area. They held experiences and ideas in common. Both of the Georges moved to England and made it their permanent home. They both had professional connections too, ones that began in Germany and then were continued after they were in Britain. The two people named Johann lived their entire lives in Germany. J.S. Bach is the only member of this quartet who never met Handel. Johann Mattheson, on the other hand, is important to both Handel and to the Doctrine of Affections. Mattheson may have almost killed Handel in a duel, but Mattheson and Handel were friends and they collaborated professionally. After Handel's death, that Matheson was the first to translate Handel's biography into German. Matheson had an illustrious career as a composer, a Kapellmeister, and a writer. In the course of his work, Matheson consolidated and articulated the clearest version we have of the Doctrine of Affections. It is his work which allows them to be studied. In a few minutes, I will sing Handel's aria, Se Paris le matin bene. It's from the opera Riccardo Primo. First, though, I will demonstrate how the Doctrine of Affections can be seen at work in this piece of music. I will show how Handel integrated the doctrine of the affections into his writing of both melody and harmony. Understanding the compositional intent has helped me in my interpretation, just as any other form of notation would. This analysis will be limited by time constraints, but there's considerably more detail available on the subject. My bibliography has been offered up. While I've drawn from many academic sources, the best lists and charts that I could find were in a doctoral thesis produced by Frederick Wessel. He has my gratitude for both his industrious research and his organized mind. I have reproduced fragments of his work in these slides. So, first I will assess my tempo marking. In this case, Handel tells me that it is larghetto. This tells me that the melody will be sorrowful, sobbing, afflicted, among other things. Next, I will look at my key signature. This key of C minor communicates madness, despair, sorrow, and sadness. Now I will look at the time signature, referred to by Wessel as the meter. A 3/4 time signature tells us that this is meant to be tender. In this case, I've had to choose one descriptor, the one that applies best, as the other two seem somewhat contradictory. Now I can begin to assess Handel's harmonic choices. I see that whole and half steps intervals communicate plaintiveness, sorrow, doubt, grief, and sadness. I've circled the ones that are present in the vocal line, but these intervals repeat throughout the accompaniment as well. Awareness of this should lead me to accentuate these harmonic relationships when I sing. The accompaniment provides additional affective information. Loveliness, tenderness, ingratiation, and a general pleasantness might be considered statements regarding the character of the singer. A line of descending thirds repeats itself in the accompaniment line. This reinforces the sense of melancholy and supplication. And in case you haven't gotten the point yet, Handel also uses the interval of a minor third over and over again in the melody and the accompaniment. Once again, this aria can be shown to be a statement of tenderness, grieving, and sorrow. This provides an overlay that includes the 5 elements of analysis that I have applied so far. It is apparent that Handel invested his music with a great deal of emotive intent. Understanding the Doctrine of Affections and how Handel applied it has helped me see Baroque music in a completely different light. By this point, the words seem almost redundant. The music has already spoken through the tools provided by the Doctrine of Affections. All that is left is for the musicians to realize Handel's intent.
for